The Starfield expansion saga continues because Emil Pagliarulo, the lead designer and the lead writer over on Starfield, has responded to the criticisms of the expansion and the criticisms of the interview that I covered in my last video on this. Additionally, Bruce Nesmith, which was the lead designer on Skyrim and a systems designer on Starfield, has commented on the possibility of Bethesda switching to something like Unreal Engine for The Elder Scrolls 6. So there's quite a lot to talk about. But we're going to start off with Emil. I have found their response to be lacking, highly manipulative, and honestly just pointing towards trends in this industry that I keep pointing out over and over again that need to be eliminated, and we should talk about it. And hopefully this is the last time that I talk about Starfield, at least for a good long while. So I'm going to make sure that in this video, maybe it runs a bit longer than usual, but I want to get everything that I have to say about Bethesda Game Studios out there. So hi, I'm Mug. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. It's great to see you. You might have noticed that I haven't cut my hair, which was going to happen at 50,000 subscribers. It's been a rough week. I've had some internet problems, so actually this was all recorded in the past, and probably current me has his haircut, okay? All kidding aside, thank you for coming back. Thank you for your support. Remember to hit the like button if you enjoy the video. Helps this video reach farther, helps the channel grow, and I appreciate it greatly. So Emil, in response to this person on Twitter, Steven, starts by saying that he understands and appreciates where they're coming from. He talks about how Twitter/X has never been a place for polite discourse, but he still engages with fans, and he talks probably more than he should because he thinks a bridge with the devs is important. And I agree 100%. I've said it many times that I think that the connection, the communication that we have as customers, as gamers, with developers has been very broken in recent years, and that needs to be repaired. And hey, I think that this is admirable. It's a good thing to say, even if everything that comes after I find not good. Now, he does acknowledge right off the bat that he's doing a lot of marketing speak in that interview that we covered, which, hey, is assumed, but it's what is implied in those feelings that really bothers me. And reading between the lines, he is very hyperbolic about things because he's very proud of the team that worked on Shattered Space, and they deserve nothing less. And look, I can understand that, but I don't think that's good when you're addressing your customers from a PR perspective to come off that way, which I think most people feel you came off like you were patting yourself on the back. He still defends us by saying that optimism and excitement are standard for interviews, and that the intention there wasn't to come off as mud in the eyes of dissatisfied fans. And once again, he takes a step back and says, but he's also very proud of Shattered Space. Everybody is. Most of the quests and levels were done by designers that are very experienced and have worked on previous games and DLCs dating back to Morrowind. They're good at what they do, and it shows. I beg to differ. I beg to differ strongly as a person who has been playing Bethesda games since Morrowind. I beg to differ. And a lot of people bring up a really interesting conversation that I probably should explore more in depth sometime here on the channel of, are these games getting worse, or is it just by the very nature that you've played so many games now that you start to see how things repeat? And I just want to say that in this specific context, that argument doesn't count, because if I've been playing the game since Morrowind and they've been making them since Morrowind, we should be evolving at the same pace. They should still be capable of surprising me and doing new things because they should have all of that experience and all of that knowledge there, and they should be aware that a lot of people playing these games have played since Morrowind. So if something feels like a retread, like they're just repeating concepts and ideas from previous DLCs and other things just executed on worse, but these are the same people that made those old ones, you see where I'm going with this? Plus, I get plenty surprised and happy by games all of the time. I love video games, and I don't think my disappointment from Shattered Space comes from me just not liking this formula anymore. I think that if I'm disappointed with Shattered Space, it could very well be because there's a lot of other better games out right now, but it could also very well be what I think it is, that these quests, this scenario is just not up to a standard that this very company has had in the past, even when I separate myself as much as possible from nostalgia. Now, here we reach a point that I'm really not happy with. If folks haven't played Shattered Space and they like Starfield, I think they're missing out. And I agree. If you really like Starfield, you're probably going to like Shattered Space, not for $30, but you're probably going to enjoy it. But that is very dependent on if you left Starfield feeling like you wanted more Starfield, not better Starfield, just more Starfield. But he says, if folks played Shattered Space and still don't like it, that makes me sad, honestly. Just know that we've also been hearing from plenty of people who love it. Just know that there's people who like it is a really strange, manipulative way of saying, bro, that's your opinion, and there's a lot of people who disagree with you, so don't think that your opinion is right. It's just an opinion. And I strongly disagree with this sentiment. My opinion is right for me. There's a large group of people who think that Shattered Space is overall disappointing and a very bad omen for the future of the company by the nature of it being a return to a classic structure that you couldn't even do right. This idea of, but there's people who love it as a defense, makes it sound like that majority of people that are voicing their concerns shouldn't be regarded as a priority, that shouldn't be where they place their focus on, that instead we must be doing something right because there exists people on the planet that like what we did. And it's this head in the sand mentality that I've been talking about so much in recent videos. It's like, guys, I don't want to address your criticisms. I don't think that the team should focus on all of the negative stuff that you guys are putting out there regarding this expansion, because there's people who like it. But that's exactly the opposite of what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to acknowledge those criticisms and you're supposed to directly work towards resolving them, not to transform them into whatever you think are the most important criticisms. You shouldn't ignore them and say that there are people who like them, because there's people who like literal garbage. There's people out there going out to bat for things for any number of reasons. It's just a very twisted way of trying to manipulate the conversation towards actually what we're doing is fine. It's just that your tastes are weird, and it's just an extension of in the interview when he said it's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. That very interview that he started off this thread by saying, sometimes I'm just overly optimistic because it's for the press. Well, you're just doing the same thing with different words here, Emil. Stop treating us like we're dumb. And again, next tweet shifts the blame towards the fans. Maybe it's a game of expectations. Fans want a lot, and we do all we can to accommodate them. Here's what I can tell you, nobody, and I mean nobody at Bethesda, is patting themselves on the back while ignoring our players. Well, the issue is that, one, you shouldn't say that fans want a lot, so because our expectations are high, we're disappointed. So what happens with fans like me? What happens with people like me that just thought that Shattered Space was a good testing ground to see if you guys could still make a more contained story in one of your little explorable areas like you've done in so many DLCs before? My expectations were just, please make this as good as the average Fallout 4, Fallout 3, or Skyrim DLC, and you fell completely flat even against those very basic standards. How is that having high expectations? Why are you trying to shift the blame towards, hey, people just expected too much, man? Like, they expect something worth $30. What can we do? But then it's even followed up with, we're not ignoring our players, even though all we're doing here is focusing on the positive feedback that we've received on the game and trying to minimize the negative things that our players have said. How is this communicating that when you're actively proving the opposite? And we reach the part that really, really pisses me off. Starfield is a massive game, and it takes time for us to address things. We move as fast as we can, as safely as we can. Game development is always tricky, but with a game as big as Starfield, every fix could potentially break something else. Guys, you don't get it. Making games is really hard. You should listen, guys. It's so hard for us to make games. And you know what? They're basically miracles. I regard pretty much every video game that exists as a miracle. Like, how did you guys put all of this together? Especially if you're a fan of Bethesda games, you see how clearly they are miracles because we can, like, actually observe the tape that is holding them together for like the last 10 years. But this isn't supposed to be a pity party. You're offering a product for sale. You're selling people a video game. They're going to give you money and they expect a certain value, a certain experience for that time and for that money in exchange. And it's completely fair for people to criticize what they're getting, to compare it to other video games that exist out on the market, to create exceptions for things based on personal taste, to have all of these conversations, and of course to be very negative on a game that they believe doesn't provide them with enough for what you're asking. All video games are on an even playing field. You come out into a market and you are judged by what you present. Stop trying to tell me that, guys, a game as big as Starfield, you don't get the spaghetti code behind making these games work on our engine, which is an upgraded engine of an engine that was outdated by the time it came out. Stop trying to justify your product being worse, because what you're telling me is please have pity for what we do and still give us your money even though it's not as good as you want it to be. And that is not acceptable in this world at all. I don't care that you moved as fast as you could and as safely as you could, but it's tricky. I get the final product and I'm disappointed, and I'm going to voice that opinion. And if you think that you should take into account the circumstances of my life when I made it, that doesn't work in any other place in the world, man. If I go to a restaurant and I order a pizza and they deliver me a piece of uncooked bread, I'm not going to get the chef saying, sorry, I had to answer an emergency phone call. I had a family emergency. Could you please have some empathy for me? And also still pay me for this piece of bread that I promised was going to be a pizza, but it isn't. And also leave me a good review on Yelp. Especially because that analogy doesn't even work. Because at a restaurant, I'm ordering for food and I'm expecting for it to be delivered. Here, I didn't order shit. I'm waiting for you on your timeline to do what you should to deliver me the best product. And you can't even do it with those circumstances. Stop telling me that it's so hard to make games. Stop trying to manipulate me. Stop trying to gaslight me as a customer and make me feel like my criticism isn't valid. Stop trying to make me feel like the villain, because I'm not. This is giving me flashbacks of the Ubisoft monetization director calling everybody criticizing Ubisoft non-decent human beings. Developers need to stop trying to manipulate their customers. How about you just deliver good games instead of this, man? It's so tiring. I'm being so honest that I'm tired of it. And I'm going to keep fighting it. I'm going to keep making videos on it. I just can't sit idle as these guys try and make us the villains. We just want to enjoy games. They're just trying to turn this all into a version of the world that I just cannot stand by. I don't care what the trials and tribulations of making Starfield were. I care about the thing that you sell me for money. It's that simple, my guy. But Emil finishes off by saying, to close, let me just say I love games. I love Bethesda's games. I've been playing them since the Terminator days. All I or anyone here wants to do is make those games and make them better. No ego, no arrogance, just a lot of hard work and appreciation for our fans. And I have no doubt that Emil loves video games. I'm sure he does. It's really hard not to love video games from my perspective, because they're just awesome, man. But don't tell me about your hard work and about your appreciation, because you're not listening and you're not improving. You're not making the best games, and you've made terrible decisions along the way. And that's just the way it is. So let me get everything that I have to say about Bethesda out. I'm a huge Bethesda fan. Specifically the studios. You know, Bethesda, you have to separate the publisher that's got things like id, so the Doom games, and Arcane, so Dishonored, Deathloop under them, and just the studios that have done the Bethesda Game Studios RPGs that you probably know and love. I love them so much, and I want the best for this studio, for this type of RPG to exist. I really, really do. But I don't think that they can do it anymore. I actually went not too long after Starfield to make a video called the Downfall of Bethesda or something like that, looking at the entire history of the studio to try and identify some of the core mistakes that they've made. And that video is up on the channel. I recommend it. I was sick when I made it, much like I'm coming down with a flu right now for this one, so coincidence? And in digging a lot for so many interviews, for behind the scenes stuff back then, Bethesda used to want to be at the forefront of gaming. The latest tech, the latest innovations, the coolest stuff, ahead of the curve in every possible way. And they were so ahead of the curve that when they came out with stuff like Oblivion, they were just so ahead in a lot of different ways that after that, they slowed down compared to the rest of the industry, but comparatively, they still got away with it at the time of things like Fallout 3 and Skyrim, because they had invested so much into being ahead back then that they had that advantage to play with for a long while. And probably around Skyrim, that advantage ran out. And the problem is that they didn't go back into that philosophy of, we need the tools, the engine at our core. We need the philosophy with which we work on our games. We need the goal of our games to be something that was thought impossible before, which is how they approached something like Morrowind. They didn't reset that. They just tried to keep trucking along with the same initial monumental efforts and visionary decisions that they made all the way back for Morrowind. I made that video on toxic positivity, and I'm actually really happy in a way that I see so many people quoting that video in the comments now. I see Hubersoft, I see Bethesda everywhere, but it's become so true, and they just keep proving that hubris, that they think that what they do is so special. They find pity for themselves and how difficult it is to make these games, that they don't ask the question, why is it? What are we doing wrong? Why do we need a nakey jakey video with 6 million views saying Bethesda's game design was outdated 10 years ago, and that being such a true statement, man? Because they're not addressing the core issues. They're not sitting down to take a holistic look at the company and what they're doing and what their goals are. Instead, they're just moving forward because inertia just carries this now. It's a business. It needs to keep moving, and it feels from the side of the customer that they're just squeezing out everything that they can from this formula without innovating and without making changes that are desperately needed. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the engine. Let's talk about that interview with Bruce Nesmith, who was the lead designer on Skyrim and who was a systems designer on Starfield, because he brings up good points. It very specifically brings up the idea that the Creation Engine 2, which is still being built on the foundations of the Gamebryo engine that they built Morrowind on, is at fault for a lot of the problems and the limitations that Bethesda finds, and Bruce says that this engine has been specifically crafted by Bethesda to complete its purpose. And this comes amidst a lot of conversations like 343 moving Halo to Unreal, Helldivers 2 devs, Arrowhead, are looking to move to Unreal, CD Projekt Red is moving away from the Red engine, surprisingly, after finally making it work with Phantom Liberty. But Nesmith brings up that there's plenty of bad games on Unreal too, that engines are just tools, and they need to be crafted in order to complete what you want, the vision you have. And that the Creation Engine, while it is an interesting thought to move to Unreal Engine because it would get rid of tech debt, it's an engine that was crafted specifically for this, and I've been thinking a lot about this. Now, just to clarify what tech debt is, it's this idea that this engine has been built up from Gamebryo years and years and years in the past, and a lot of the things that have been built on top of it means that there's probably code from Gamebryo still in there that can't be touched, and there's certain limitations that exist. There's things that just don't work anymore because over time, as you keep modifying the engine and lead up to the Creation Engine 2, some things were never future-proofed. So you're just building on top of it, and you can't really go back that deep in to touch things without breaking everything again. And that can cause very big, unexpected problems down the line, and moving to Unreal Engine would solve that. But it would also mean retraining everybody to work in Unreal Engine. It would mean starting fresh, which is what I've been saying Bethesda needs to do, but let's ignore this for a moment. So instead of doing the thing that I think a lot of people who focus a lot on Bethesda, who cover a lot of Bethesda's games do, which is Creation Engine bad, please fix engine. Let's talk about why. Every Bethesda game since Morrowind has in its DNA a certain formula and a certain feel that has not changed and has grown stagnant. Every time a small feature is added into a Bethesda game, because it's a Bethesda game, it feels like a giant change. And that's one of the reasons that they're so popular to mod as well, right? Because that feeling of, oh wow, this is such a transformative change, is there in mods as well. But when you jump from game to game, every little addition, be that sprint or iron sights or the guns behaving like guns instead of being RNG like they were in Fallout 3 on if the bullet would hit or not. Each of these things feels like, oh wow, they have improved this so much that now this is possible, even though they are just mediocre at what they are. When you consider it like shooting, it's not great shooting in these games. Starfield is better than Fallout 4, but Starfield still feels pretty meh. But it's just the overall sensation of it, the way you walk, the way the camera bobs when you jump, the way that you interact with objects and terrain, the way that you talk to NPCs and the camera zooms in on their face, the menus, the loading times, everything about these games feels so familiar, including, you know, their bugs and a lot of their core systems. So let me rephrase that idea that Bethesda needs a new engine. Bethesda needs to break away from their formula in a more meaningful way. At this point in time, I am excited for Avowed because it looks like Obsidian is trying to make a Bethesda-style RPG. I know plenty of people tell me, why do you people love Obsidian so much? I love Obsidian because I really like their games. It's not just Fallout New Vegas. I liked Tyranny. I liked Pillars of Eternity. I loved Pentiment. I thought Pentiment was awesome. I like their writing, I like the style of RPG that they make, be that the more traditional CRPG or the more experimental stuff, and Avowed being them doing a Bethesda game studio style RPG is exciting, because even if they fail, from the pre-release footage, from the interviews we've seen, they're placing a lot of emphasis on combat feeling good. That's wild. Imagine a Bethesda Game Studios RPG where the combat had more depth to it. Which I'm not saying that there's not a lot of options for combat in Starfield or in Skyrim when you factor in the powers and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to you can shoot and spam heal and the combat is over. Sure, you could do other things, but doing those other things is for fun. That's a very different thing than in Cyberpunk when you have to commit to your build and really use what you have committed to in order to get through something. In Cyberpunk, if you don't build to stand in front of people and shoot them, and then you try and do that, you just lose. So the game, at least on normal difficulties, right, is forcing you to choose a build and to play as it. And if Avowed has me exploiting the advantages of different weapons against different enemies, or forcing me to engage in different combat mechanics that are interesting or creative and actually fulfilling to use, and then everything else about it is garbage, I would still consider it a huge success because it's moving the Bethesda Game Studios style RPG forward in at least one direction, and once again, it's not made by Bethesda. That is the type of change I am talking about. So it comes down to this: they need to do something bigger with the formula. They need something more transformative that actually feels like a generational jump, like something new. Because their worlds and the crafting of those worlds and their quest design and their stories, their writing, seems to be going slightly downhill depending on who you ask, either a little bit downhill or very majorly downhill. And because the rest of the world keeps advancing, it just feels more and more outdated on top of that. It's both things at once. So we need better stealth systems, we need better climbing systems for things like agility. We need more interesting combat systems that feel better, that are weighty and have more depth to them so that engaging in combat is fun over the course of 120 hours instead of either an exploit or just clicking and healing. We need better level and world design, which sometimes Starfield hints at, of that more immersive sim-style quest structure. We also need them to focus on not dumbing them down. If they want to make their games as approachable as possible, put in accessibility options. Just have a toggle when you start the game for, like, do you want this to be simplified or do you want to have more control and use more complex systems for RPGs? Elder Scrolls 6 should not feel like Starfield, but with a fantasy skin on top of it. It shouldn't. There's things that need to be updated here. You can't have loading screens for every single section, especially in a game where you are constantly changing sections of the world, right? You need a better camera system for your dialogue and cinematics. You need better things at this point. And if the reason that that's not implemented is the creation engine, which I'm not saying it is, I'm saying if it is, it needs to go. Either that needs to be reworked in such a way that those optimizations, that those changes, that those improvements can be made to modernize the game and hopefully from there focus on the quality of everything else, or it just needs to go. But really, it's the unwillingness and the hubris that I see from Bethesda that makes me believe that they just can't move forward. Because even now, Emil, addressing the backlash, is still telling us that people like it, and it's not everybody's cup of tea fundamentally, that you guys don't understand how difficult it is to make games. I get it, man. You're saying that you're not patting yourself on the back while still saying, but we did pretty well considering how difficult it is to make games, something that you people wouldn't know. It's exhausting. Bethesda, desperately needs to evolve. They need to change. And if they're not willing to do that, and instead they just want to hear that some people love the game and they want to bury their heads in how difficult their jobs are, to me, they're dead. And to me, if it wasn't clear the last 2 times we've talked about them, it should be clear right now that Elder Scrolls 6 is not something that you should pay attention to. Even if it does come out and there's a ton of trailers and hype, you should probably wait 3 years for the enhanced edition. Fallout 5, which would normally be my most anticipated game, I don't care anymore. I'll believe it when I see it. When I hear 50 million people tell me it's great, then I'll care. Bethesda's just not willing to move from their formula, but they're also not willing to evolve it and advance it. And all the meanwhile, they're treating customers worse and worse. They still do all of the horrible practices that they have, from things like paid mods, which I'll never get over. It's a shit show. It's profoundly disappointing, and I don't know why they do it. I think everybody that is a Bethesda fan, which is a lot of people, would buy a smaller, maybe 20-hour game where they're testing out their engine for a new combat system, or where they're testing it out for different stuff that they could implement, and they're just experimenting with it, and they want to justify those big changes with a game. Tons of studios have done that, tested new things out with a smaller project, but they refuse. They either put out gigantic, massive RPGs that feel increasingly bloated and stale and outdated, or Fallout Shelter to try and capitalize on their IP, I guess. But they can't actually try something new. They keep saying that Starfield was so ambitious for them because of going to outer space. And I have never felt more deceived, because Starfield doesn't feel like outer space at all. To me, I know there's going to be people in the comments, there always is, Starfield is great, you're just haters. Starfield feels like fast travel menus. Starfield feels like any other Bethesda RPG before it, except that you can teleport into different areas that are procedurally generated with a number of different biomes. It's the same thing. It feels like the same thing, because none of the things that would have mattered to make it feel like a space RPG are there beyond it is set in space. But that's not good enough. And Bethesda Game Studios overall at the moment is just not good enough, I think. I don't like these behaviors. I don't like being told I'm to blame, my expectations are to blame, or that other people like this game. It's just that I have a weird opinion. I don't appreciate being treated like this, and I don't like that these people control some of my favorite IPs of all time. I always approach these things with the best at heart. I want them to improve, and this is why I say these things. I don't say them because I like hating on them, or like I want to get on a hate train. Hopefully this is the last time that I have to talk about this for a while, because I have other cooler things to talk about. There's other better stuff out there. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your support. We've reached 50,000 subscribers. I suppose the next goal would be 75k. Leave your suggestions for what crazy thing I should do at 75k. 50k was cutting my hair. Now what? Let's have some fun with it. Thank you so much for watching. A very special thanks to the patrons up on the $1 patron wall. It's called that way because there's only one tier, $1. And if you want to support what I do, there's a link down in the description below. Since this video has already gone on for way longer than my normal videos do, if you're here at the end, I assume that you care a lot and you're a fan of the channel. I just want to say I'm really, really grateful. I've been struggling a lot with keeping up quality output on the channel while having a 9-to-5, which I don't know if people are aware of that. I have a job every day that takes up a lot of time, and it's been really hard to work, make good videos, and also play games. It's a lot, because as I want the quality of the videos to go up and up on the channel, it's really hard to increase that quality, at least initially, without each video just taking more and more time to edit and make and produce, and every little detail that goes into them. Thank you for your support. And to be so lucky that I'm in a position where I can have people watch it. Like, that's still, I don't believe it most days. So thank you. And as always, go out there and enjoy some great games. Got 3 great games that came out in October. There's videos coming up on all 3 of them. Late, but they're coming. And I'll see you again very soon.